If you do like these tank chats, do please subscribe to the Tank Museum's YouTube channel. This tank chat's going to be about the British Army's Challenger 2 tank. And we have the great advantage with Challenger 2, it's an in-service vehicle. Because we've got so much material on Challenger 2, we're going to break this tank chat into two parts. The first part, I'm going to be telling you about the design and what was behind Challenger 2. And in the second part, we're going to talk to some of the soldiers that serve on Challenger 2, look at some of the details of the tank, and also a little bit about where it saw service. So looking at Challenger 2, we can see there are similarities in how it looks like Challenger 1. The big difference, of course, if you're just trying to do from the point of view of recognition, how do you tell Challenger 1 from Challenger 2? Look at that, what they call a barbette that's above the main gun. That contains togs underneath a housing there. That's in the middle on Challenger 2, above the gun. On Challenger 1, it's on the side of the turret. So looking at the different features, we've mentioned already the firepower. This is the L30 Charm gun, 120mm. It's rifled still. It's got the muzzle reference distance on the end of the barrel. The sight there above for the thermal observation. This one, because it's V5, we don't actually have the commander's round sight that's normally just in front of his position, is not fixed to V5. But the idea there, that is what the commander is looking through, and it's got a 360 vision, can go all the way around, and the gunner's sight is actually in front of it on the turret top. And there's a revisionary, an old telescopic sight that actually is on the side of the gun, so that if all the other systems fail, they can still look through, and it's got the old graticles and crosshairs on and still aim the gun if the other systems break down at all. It's got a laser range finding system on it that is accurate plus or minus 5 meters out to 9,950 meters. And again, back to looking at generations of tank, this idea that you can accurately estimate your target, really important. So that again, if you're firing Hesh, if it's going over the top, you know exactly where it's going to land. If you're firing directly, it's in range, because again, flat trajectory of a fin round that's going off there direct towards the target. These are all elements that come into play. And on the back of the turret, in one of the bustles, there's actually a weather reading station that again feeds information into the main computer. So if you're going to be firing and there's a crosswind, etc., all of those atmospherics are taken into account before the main armament is actually fired. So again, we've mentioned the fact this gun, they're lasting longer in service, because now with this gun, they're actually chroming the barrels. One of the things we don't often talk about is obviously when a round actually goes down that rifle barrel, it actually is tremendously abrasive as it's going down the barrel. So it actually wears away very, very quickly. By chroming the barrel, you're extending barrel life. So it'll go on a lot longer. And again, these things all actually come into play when we talked earlier about cost, because you don't want to be replacing a very, very expensive barrel too often. Same as why they've got simulators now. Actually, we do need to fire real rounds. That's the only way the soldiers are going to be able to find out. But if they can learn a lot of that on simulators and training aids, etc., it brings the overall cost of running a tank down. But very effective gunnery system there. Inside the turret, to actually man that, you've got the traditional 3 guys in the turret, 4th guy down the front as a driver. So commander, hunter, looking out for the targets using that sighting system. The gunner sits in front of him. He's got almost what look like a PlayStation controls for controlling the actual gun and firing. On the opposite side again is the loader. The loader has, again, go back to looking like a Challenger 1 and even before that Chieftain. Rounds are stowed around him. It's what we would now call 3-part ammunition. You've got the round would go in, followed by a bag charge that are in protected bins that they go around the bottom of the turret, and they're all kept, by the way, any explosive kept below the turret line, so again, extra protection there. The bag charge goes in, and then there's a small cartridge that is actually used to actually fire that out the end of the barrel with a tremendous force, as you can imagine, that goes on in there. So 3 of them, the driver's down at the front. He's the guy that, again, from the point of view, he's got a reclining position, that keeps the turret nice and low when he's driving along, or he can make his seat sit up so he can look straight forward. He's got a night side if he wants to be driving at night as well, that he can change on his vision port there. One of the areas that was criticised, and in the future upgrade is bound to change, the commander does not have a night sight, so that he can't engage in the same way as a gunner can in that hunter-killer manner. And that's one of the future improvements that again, that was a cost issue early days, picked up very early on. That was one of the disappointments from what otherwise is a very superb and accurate gunnery system. 12 seconds, by the way, to turn that entire turret around, and it's if you watch it on exercise, etc., it's very, very impressive how quickly it can lock onto a target, and how quickly the crew there can engage, because this was one of the aims. It had to be about twice as fast. They wanted it all to be than Challenger 1 and Chieftain before it. Drivers I mentioned in there, it's a tiller system he's using, and to power the vehicle along at the back is a CV12 Rolls-Royce turbocharged diesel engine. Now that can get the vehicle up on road speeds, officially about 60 kilometres. They can go way faster than that actually, probably about to 80 on roads. Challenger 2 has 8 fuel tanks, which altogether take about 1,500 litres carried under the armour. But of course, if you look around the back, there's those 2 extra fuel drums, 350 litre fuel drums. That means it gives about an extra 100 kilometres if you put those on as well on range. So a Challenger 2 can go with its normal fuel tanks 450 kilometres, or an extra 100, 550 if it's carrying those 2 extra fuel drums on the rear. In terms of weight, the overall vehicle here, again, it's down just over 60 tonnes. When they add all the extra armour on, so what we would call theatre entry standard, so they will put the side armour on, the extra armour on the front, the bridging weight then goes up. They actually classify it as an 80-tonne bridging weight on this particular vehicle. So it becomes a much different vehicle. So really what you're looking at normally is when it trains, it doesn't have the extra armour on. The extra armour, depending on the nature of the conflict it goes to, they add the extra Dorchester armour around the sides, front packs as well, or ERA armour, explosive reactive armour goes on the front. So all that gets added on. And because of Operation Telic and the idea of urban warfare, bar armour can be added as well. So depending on the nature of the conflict you're going to, you will build up that levels of protection. Now RV5 here, it has not got the bazooka plates on the side. In fact, those bazooka plates are really there just to take the signature down a bit and hold the dust down. Actually, again, it would be standard practice to add Dorchester level 2 armour packs on the side as soon as you were going to go off to conflict, so you wouldn't normally see it, and this one hasn't got any plates on at all. Now, as part of that transmission, the engine pack in the back is bolted to a TM54 transmission. That all comes out. You can change the engine in about an hour, hour and a half, which again is tremendously different from the 8 hours previously for vehicles like Chieftain, or about an hour, we think, on Leopard 2 to do an engine change. And that engine is giving that power to about 1,200, upgrading slightly in the future, to the drive sprocket, which in British vehicles, again, is at the rear there. And that's driving this track along. And what you're looking here, this is double pin track. It's got rubber pads on. The rubber pads are only really to protect roads. There's no issue about, they don't add anything to the combat efficiency. It just stops tanks ripping up the roads. Certainly, and it's a legal requirement in most Western European countries. Double pin going through, and this is what they call a live track. The actual bushes in there are actually sprung, and that's what means that the track, if you lay it down, it's got a natural curve inwards. It wants to curve up because of that springing system in there, so hence the phrase live track that they've got there. Road wheels, you've got double road wheels, 12 on each side, and again during the production run, just like the track, actually 3 different types of track have been used on Challenger. As improvements come into service, these are the early road wheels. Later on, they ended up with road wheels with little holes in, 15 holes, reduce the weight a little bit, but that wasn't the issue. It was to stop mud compacting between the double wheels. And again, these road wheels are on Hydrographs suspension arms. Have a look at our recent workshop diaries, where Jonathan takes you through how Hydrographs works, basically nitrogen gas and an oil. and it acts both as a damper and a spring as well as you're going along. So it's a shock absorber and it springs back all with that one arm, and it's a really sophisticated system by Horseman Defence, and it gives a tremendously smooth ride, which again, by having a smooth ride, it means that gun, when you're firing on the move, has got a much more accurate chance of hitting the target because you've got such a stable platform underneath you as you're moving along. And when you're looking at the outside of a Challenger 2 tank, you're really looking at a skin. The key armour protection is underneath. So, for example, with the turret, it's got a cast front, welded back to it, but then the Chobham armour packs are put on there, and this thin metal skin is welded over the top. So it's underneath is a key element of, again, with Challenger tanks, that very interesting matrix that makes up Chobham armour, which has tremendously good defensive capabilities, not just against kinetic energy rounds, but chemical rounds as well. So really important feature there. And as I mentioned earlier, or will mention, a very important thing that gives confidence to the crews, because the survivability of a Challenger is outstanding. Again, looking at some of those other features that we can see from the outside, smoke dischargers banked either side, but Challenger also, like a number of tanks, has the way of making smoke by being able to put diesel onto the hot exhaust, and that builds up a big white smoke stream very quickly, so you can hide yourself, back off, you'll reposition, etc., without the enemy being able to visually see you. And again, you'll see that faceted surface, which I talked about earlier on. Part of that is to do with this idea of lessening your signature to radar. And again, a lot of things that you might have seen on the outside of the tank in the older days are actually now hidden in those boxes at the rear, the bustle at the back of the turret. They're actually, there's a number of different boxes there, so other equipment is hidden in there rather than being on the outside, which actually changes the signature of the vehicle. And again, in the back of that bustle, you've got an MBC, an overpressure system, and also for the crews, one of the great advantages with Challenger 2, you've also got a crew temperature system, so that you can actually adjust the temperature inside the vehicle, which of course, if you're out in batters on the Canadian prairies in cold weather, fantastic that you've got a heating system. Or the other extreme is, if it's getting very hot in there, it's in essence a type of air conditioning there as well. So that's again a really important feature for the for crews' comfort and the ergonomics. And again, you're looking at a generation where what you might call the earlier tanks, the ergonomics have been thought through an awful lot better, so that all the guts of the tanks, the wiring, there was half a ton of wiring on I think it was Chieftain alone, you know, all of that was exposed inside the turret, much of that's now gone in the way it's been put together. Fire suppression system for the engine that you've got there as well, that you'll see on a lot of modern vehicles now. And again, overall, one of the things that comes across is, I mentioned that word ergonomics, the crews liked Challenger 2 an awful lot. It's not just it's got that better firepower, there's a lot more comfort elements to do with Challenger crew. This has got a hydraulic tensioner system. The driver can tension the track inside. That again means wear rates of the track don't go through the roof. If you've got slack track, it's wearing it quicker. So things like that are thought through and really do benefit the crew compared to that previous generation there. So overall, a very impressive bit of kit, and something, as I mentioned as well, it's going to be in service quite some time, so those upgrades, just like they've been going on all the time really as this tank's gone into service, smaller upgrades have been going on throughout its service life, and that's why when you look at some of the imagery, you'll see very different, not just the protection standards, but sometimes different items, like I mentioned the road wheels. That's part and parcel of just a tank being in service as newer items come into play, or a better model of something is there to be used. Now, Challenger 2 has seen operational service. It went off to the Balkans, where again, fortunately it didn't have to fire its gun in anger, but as we've talked about before, quite often with peace enforcement, just turning up with a tank tends to make people back off, understand the issues. Some of the factions in the Balkans were actually invited to see Challenger 2 firing, just from that point of view of saying, listen, this is a sort of threat we have here if we have to use it. So it's been there, it's seen service in Europe. It's seen service, of course, in Operation Telic 2003, the invasion of Iraq from Kuwait, and the British forces there ended up going out with a battle group, 7th Armoured Brigade, ends up there going out and using the Challenger 2. There are engagements with enemy tanks. It is very successfully used, and one of the things that come out when you look at Operation Telic is the survivability of the tank. So going back to that design process, Dorchester Level 2 armour, the extra armour that was put on the sides, has a tremendous confidence-giving boost to the crews, because one of those Challenger 2s was actually struck by 30 or over 30 RPGs. None of them penetrated. There was only one penetration of a Challenger 2 where the driver got slightly wounded in his foot. There was a loss of a Challenger 2, but that was a blue-on-blue incident. So actually, you know, there's always going to be something that's going to defeat a tank at some point. But in Operation Telic, that Dorchester Level 2 armour, the upgrades, etc., really proved their worth. We're here on Salisbury Plain at a training area called Cope Hill Down, and we're with the crew of 3-4 Bravo. That's a Challenger 2 of the Royal Tank Regiment, and the crew are going to tell us what their role is and how they'd operate a vehicle such as this. Sergeant James Teese, you're the commander of this vehicle. Can you just tell us a little bit, first of all, about what your role is as a commander of a Challenger 2?
My role as a Challenger 2 commander is, but I have overall control of the vehicle and all other 3, because there's 4 of us complete inside the vehicle, ensuring that the gunner is laid onto the correct targets, my driver's going in the right direction and not going over any dangerous ground, and my operator's loading the main armament, or more importantly, making brews for the crew as well at the same time. But
that's your role? That's your role?
Not my role. I'll delegate that one off. The normal makeup of our troop would be, we'd have our troop leader, which is from a 2nd lieutenant up to roughly sometimes a captain, maybe. We have our troop sergeant, which is myself. We have our senior corporal, which is a more experienced of the 2 corporal tank commanders, and we have a junior corporal, which has normally joined us just off the bat of his commander's course. And then as you rotate through your troop and experience, you then go up the call signs from there on. I don't think there's ever a time limit to becoming an effective tank commander. I think every time you do an exercise, there's always something new to learn as a commander, and obviously learn off other people. But I think to be a very competent tank commander, it takes about 3 to maybe 4 years to really get a grip of everything you need to do. As it goes for being really good, it never really ends. You can always.
And are you really good?
Oh, no comment.
And Challenger 2 as a tank, how do you like it? You know, what's the pros and cons of working on Challenger 2?
I think, I mean, it's a good vehicle. I think any vehicle that's brought into service have their issues. We all have to work around it. As a running vehicle, as long as they're kept all the time running, they're quite good, reliable vehicles at times. We have a massive impact on the battlefield, not only just as a fear factor for the enemy. You know, we've seen one of these come around the corner as a dismount is quite terrifying, but also just holding the ground and working with our infantry, other infantry call signs. It's just a good mixture.
Trooper Lewis Harrington, you are the driver of this Challenger 2. Can you tell us a little bit about what it's like to drive a Challenger 2?
It is pretty intense driving it off-road. It is really fun because it can get up to some really high speeds whilst going over some really rough terrain, whilst the gunner's also inside trying to keep the gun level and scanning for targets and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's really enjoyable. My vision is basically when I'm hatched down is just through that small sight just there. You do have a permanent view of the front of the vehicle, so you can scan, look for enemy and that sort of thing, whereas everyone else is looking through a sight, which is obviously always on the move. The best way to tell if you're doing it right is the less input your commander has. So if your commander's talking to you all the time, obviously he's having to bring you on, but if your commander's sort of allowing you to do it and he knows you're competent and you can get into a fire position without him having to tell you where to go, he can point off a wood block in the distance, and you can find the best route tactically to get there. So once you get to that sort of point, then you know you're doing all right.
And what's it like driving at night?
So we have night sights that we can put in, which are good to an extent. You can see quite a bit. It's a lot more difficult. You can't really tell texture on the ground, so it's hard to read ground as you're driving. So everything looks flat. So if you're going off cross country, everything just looks flat in front of you, and that's when you sort of start to have to rely on the other crew members, and especially the gunner, because he's got quite a good view. If he's scanning out to the front, he can be calling bump ahead, come right stick, and that sort of thing. So like I say, at night it's difficult, but it's easily workable.
And what do you drive in normal civilian life?
I have a Volkswagen Sprocket.
Okay, and do you find that jumping between the two ever
It
a
is a
bit of a
bit, yeah.
challenge? Yeah.
Yeah. So in this, you've got to be quite aggressive with everything. So you brake, you really have to put a lot of force on your brake. So as soon as you jump in your civilian car, you jab the brakes on, you kind of fly forward a bit and you're not in the tank.
So schoolboy stuff, is it a bit of a thrill driving one of these?
Yeah, 100%. Well, that's the main reason I joined the regiment, is to drive Challenger 2. It's a big, massive lump of metal with a V12 engine in it. It's got a lot of power, and it's for someone who's a bit of a petrol head and likes driving, yeah, it's fantastic.
So you're Trooper Carl Davis and you're the gunner on this Challenger 2?
I am, yeah.
Could you just tell us a little bit about what that role is as being a gunner?
So my role on the vehicle is I'm in control of the 120mm cannon, the coaxially mounted machine gun, and along with the rest of the crew, my job is to mainly find, identify and eliminate the targets. If we identify a vehicle, I'll then report that up. The commander will give me authority to fire to that vehicle. I'll go through the systems to get the vehicle on target and then fire and eliminate the vehicle. So we have a HESH round, which is a high explosive round, which you'd use for more armoured personnel carriers or softer skin vehicles. We have a fin round, which is in essence a dart, an armour piercing round, which you'd use for anti-tanks, stuff like that. And then we have smoke for the vehicle, and we have the coax mounted machine gun, which is 7.62.
And when you go on an exercise, you get to fire most of those rounds?
Yeah, we get to fire all the ammunition. When you fire it for the first time, it's genuinely an experience. It's pretty surreal when you fire it and you feel the kick of the gun and actually sit in the vehicle and do it for the first time.
And what's it feel like seeing the effect of some of those rounds on a target?
I think when you do it down ranges first time, you realise what kind of power you're in control of the vehicle, and seeing the ricochet and some of the stuff you can do with it. It's pretty amazing.
Lance Corporal David King, you're the operator or the loader on this Challenger 2. Can you just give us a little bit of an indication about what that role, what it entails?
Yeah, so on the operator side, I'm up in the turret with the gunner and the commander. Basically, the role of the operator, what should be doing is, I'm on that side, I'll be loading the gun. So making sure that the gunner's, as soon as he's found a target, he's ready to fire. There's something in the gun ready to go down and kill what's on the other side. We've got the 3 different types that we can use mostly. We've got the fin, we've got the HESH. We've also got a smoke round. Whether we know we're going to meet more tanks rather than soft skin takes what ammunition we're going to take. Dealing with more of the radio side as well, so if anything the radios go down, I've got to make sure they're always up and running, because if we lose communications, we've lost communications on the battlefield, and that's something we don't want to do. We don't want to be isolated at any point. And the minor thing when we get into highs, I'm usually the mother of the tank, so I make sure everyone's fed, everyone's had their brews, everyone's all nice and warm as well.
Okay, so sort of the father figure or the mother figure.
Yeah, you've got the father, the commander, and you've got the mother on the operator side.
Right.
Yeah. So I really enjoy it myself, because it's that point you can kind of step up and you can show off to everyone that you can do it. You've kind of got most of the responsibility to the commander, but if anything goes wrong, it's not really your fault, because it's always the commander's fault. So you can take a step out and go, well, like I say, it's fault, not mine. And then we've also got like a gunnery wing up at a camp, where we can actually practice loading the rounds. So it's like a mock inside of the turret. You actually practice loading the rounds. They practice throwing in, so something could go wrong, and they've got to see how quickly you can deal with it, and you've got to deal with it properly at the same time. With the gun that we've got to make, it's a 3-piece ammunition. You've got to put the round up, you've got to put the charge up. You've got to make sure both of them go up as quick as possible. Make sure the right charge goes with the right round. For example, if you fumble about and you put the wrong round in with the wrong charge, you're not going to hit the target. Or if you put the charge in without the round. So it's a lot of pressure that you're under at the minute to make sure you do it properly. You don't want to be that one that obviously muddles up. It depends what tank you're on, how much stick you're going to get afterwards. So if you're on a troop leader's wagon, you should be able to do it straight away, because you're the senior guy in that troop to be able to do it. But the more junior guys, they do tend to do something wrong and all that, then you've got to come off and teach them how to do it properly. You can be lucky enough to stay with the crew for quite a while, but then people get promoted, people get moved away, people do tend to leave. So sometimes you do have to change it about. But if you go deployed, so we went to Oman, we kept our crew for the couple of months that we were there. So it's not like on a daily basis you're moving around, but sometimes when you're in camp and you're not doing anything, the crews can change, because people can get promoted, or people could not want to be anymore to leave. But you do normally want to stick together. The last crew we had, we got quite a good bond together. We knew what we had to do, and so everyone knows you're like a well-oiled machine. My dad was in the 4th Royal Tank Regiment, so he was back in the day, and he used to say that the tankies were the best way, and it was always the one you wanted to go to. So it's kind of growing up with them stories and the pictures of him standing in front of the tanks and telling me like he was a commander, and it was better in his day, and that the army's not where it used to be anymore. So I'm kind of just trying to show him, to prove him that I can get out there and be in commander just like him.
Yeah, no, I love it. Yeah, I love being a tank commander. I think if you join the regiment, you join the Royal Tank Regiment, it should be the seat that you want to be in. Otherwise, you're in the wrong place, basically. And I say to a lot of the younger lads when we're working on a vehicle, you know, that have just joined the squadron, you know, there is no better feeling. You know, being up the top, you have your arms out the cupola, cross country, you know, doing 40 kilometres an hour, going into a battle run closed down. You know, it's a great feeling. It's a great responsibility as well, but it's great.
Now, Challenger 2, if you go online at any time, one of the issues that's going on is that obviously in its service life, it's had a continuous number of smaller upgrades, things that go on to keep it in better trim, or here's a better product, or how do we go it. The truth though is it's going to have to stay in service. At the moment, the Army's arguing 2035, maybe 2040. It's going to need a much more major upgrade, and a number of different projects were being put together to see about whether it's automotive, whether it's gunnery, what that upgrade should be. Now, we're fortunate here at Bovington, we can look at that with you in the future, because Bovington is where the Trials and Development Unit is. We can be talking to industry as well, and we'll come back to Challenger 2 in the future so we can show you what that upgrade's going to be. And already from what we know about it, it's quite an exciting development for the Challenger 2 tank. Because again, and we'd come back, we would say this here at the Tank Museum, wouldn't we? What's happened in the Challenger 2 lifespan, we've looked at seeing the tank yet again go through the Cold War dividends. Half the Royal Armoured Corps regiments ended up being cut during the 1990s. The Challenger, the main battle tank fleet, came down an awful lot, and it's now probably around 260 tanks odd, with some in reserve. So what's going to happen with the tank in the future? When, of course, as you've liked following the tank subject, we had a point where it was there's no need for the tank again, and yet that pendulum has swung back. Other countries, not just Britain, are reinvesting in tanks. There's options for new tanks some countries have looked at, some are putting into production. And of course, what a lot of people are doing is, instead of rebuilding a brand new tank, or they're rebuilding an older version, hence that phrase platform. They're looking at a tank as a platform. What do we add to it? What might we take off? How do we configure it for the nature of the conflict it might be going into? So that idea about the tank being dead, we've always said that here. Come on, let's be careful about that. But we can help show you what's going to happen with Challenger 2 in the future, because this is a tank the British Army is going to be used in some sort of configuration for probably decades to come. If you're interested to know more about Challenger 2, we've helped in this Haynes Manual on the Challenger 2. You can get this via our shop, so look at our online website, which sells all sorts of other products as well. And do please support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, and if you have the opportunity, also back us by funding us through Patreon. We are an independent charity. We can only carry on doing all this if people like yourself support us. So please do find a way of supporting the Tank Museum.